Jesus said to his disciples, "As it was in the day of Noah, so it will be in the coming of the Son of Man. Those days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, up to the day that Noah entered the ark. They did not know until the flood came and carried them away. So will it be also with the coming of the Son of Man. 2 men will be out in the field. One will be taken, and one will be left. 2 women will be grinding at the mill. One will be taken, and one will be left. Therefore, stay awake. For you do not know on which day your Lord will come. Be sure of this. If the master of the house had known the hour of night when the thief was coming, he would have stayed awake and not let his house be broken into. So too, you also must be prepared. For at an hour you do not expect, the Son of Man will come." The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord. Good morning. Today in our church we celebrate the first Sunday of Advent. And this is one of my favorite liturgical seasons for a number of reasons. I love the season of Advent because it's a season of hope. It's a time of joy and celebration. I like the season of Advent because it means Christmas is close by. On a very superficial level, I like the season of Advent because we wear purple vestments, and purple is my favorite color. And so this is a good time of year for me as we begin our new year. Today is the first day of the year of our new liturgical year. I know that you've been paying attention and you know that all of last year we read from the Gospel of Luke. This year, we read from the Gospel of Matthew. So all year this year, we will journey with Matthew and get his perspective on the things that he saw. The beginning of Advent puts us on a journey. And it's a special kind of journey. It's a pilgrimage. And a pilgrimage is a journey, usually a long one, to a sacred place as an act of religious devotion. And y'all know I didn't make that up. Y'all know I looked it up, right? But a pilgrimage is a journey, usually a long one, to a sacred place as an act of religious devotion. And in Advent, we start our pilgrimage. And for many of us, we think because Advent ends at Christmas, that that's the end of our pilgrimage. But our pilgrimage does not end at the manger. Our pilgrimage goes beyond that. And so if you're going to be on a journey, you need to know what the destination is. You can't start off on a journey and not know where we're going. And so the end of our journey is where we were last Sunday. Now, I know you all remember, but Father Jose is kind of forgetful. You know, he doesn't remember. But last Sunday, we celebrated the solemnity of Christ, the King of the universe. That is the end of our pilgrimage. That is the sacred place to which we journey. That place, that time when Christ reigns supreme over everything. That is the journey that we are on. That is the pilgrimage we are on. And sometimes we can get confused because Christmas comes in early on that journey. And Christmas is a great time, and it's very appropriate that Christmas comes when it does, because what is more hopeful than the birth of a child? Any child. But on Christmas, we celebrate the birth of a special child. We celebrate the birth of our Lord becoming one of us, the incarnation. And that is another sign of hope, because Advent, as I said, is a season of hope. But not just of hope. It's a season of action as well. If we just sit and hope for good things and don't do anything to work for them, I think we're wasting our time. But Advent is a season of hope. First of all, it's a season of hope for peace in the world. And I know if we open up our newspapers or our iPads or iPhones or wherever we get our news, we see that the world today is still in strife, that there are nations against nations, that bad things are going on, that there's conflicts throughout the world, and we can despair. But this isn't a season of despair. This is a season of hope. And that's what we hear in today's first reading from the prophet Isaiah. Pay attention, because throughout the Advent season, we will hear from the prophet of Isaiah, readings that we're very familiar with. The virgin will bear a child. Those kinds of things you'll hear. And those things were written by Isaiah, prophesied by him 700 years before the birth of Christ. 700 years. And he talks in the reading we hear today about the mountain of the Lord becoming the highest mountain. And people throughout the world journeying to that mountain, and instruction going out from it. That has begun to happen, because instruction has indeed gone out from Jerusalem, from the apostles, from the day of Pentecost, when they went out and began to instruct the world about the Lord. And we are here today as a result of that instruction. It's a time of hope for peace in the world, and we don't see that peace happen. But we can make that peace happen. And I know some of you are looking at me strangely, saying, Deacon, I'm just one little person in Blessed SEELOS Parish in New Orleans. How can I effect world peace? Well, to quote a song from the mid-'80s, we are the world. We are the children. We are the children of God. And while it may seem impossible for us, nothing is impossible for our God. And the way that we effect peace is starting within our own lives. Because there's not one of us here, not one single person in this building right now, who doesn't have somebody in their life with whom they are not at peace. Not one of us is exempt from that. And so that's where peace has to start. You know, that other song says, let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. And so I've got to make peace with that person in my life, or those people, because usually it's more than one person in my life with whom I am not at peace. And then I have to encourage them to make peace with the people in their lives with whom they are not at peace. And not only do I have to encourage them to make peace with that person, but also to encourage them to go out and make peace. And it's like dropping a pebble into a pond. You drop a pebble in, it starts at one spot, and it ripples out across the whole water. And that can be us. We can be that pebble that starts the peace. Peace begins with us because we are the world. And while it may seem impossible to us as individuals, we are not alone on this pilgrimage. God is with us. And so, as I said, nothing is impossible for God. So during this Advent season, we are reminded in a special way to hope for peace. Peace in our lives, peace in our hearts, in our families, in our world. But not just to hope for it, to work for it as well. That's what Advent is about. Advent is also about a time of looking at our relationship with God and hoping that we can make it better. And we hear that in Paul's letter to the Romans. Paul says, you know what time it is. He says, it's time for you to wake up because you've been in the darkness for too long. Come out of the darkness into the light. Put on the armor of light. And we know in our own lives that each of us has a dark place in our lives. Each of us has a place that we need to let the light of God shine. And we're reluctant to do it. We're reluctant to do it. We call it sin. And we fall into the same sins over and over and over. When we go to confession, if we go to confession, because truth be told, many of us don't. If we go to confession, we find ourselves confessing the same sins over and over and over. Because that's the way the devil works. There are some things that may be a temptation to you that are not a temptation to me. So the devil doesn't tempt me with those things. He tempts me where I am weak, and he tempts you where you are weak. And we fall into those sins over and over and over. But Paul says, very truthfully, that salvation is nearer now than when we first believed. Salvation is nearer now than it was when you walked in these church doors this morning. Because salvation is coming. And we have to be prepared. Paul says, wake up. Stop being like the people in Noah's time who were eating and drinking, marrying and dancing and doing ordinary things every day until it was too late. And that's what we're doing. We're doing ordinary things every day. And one day it's going to be too late. So Paul reminds us, you know what time it is. The night is almost gone. The dawning is almost here. So wake up. Look at your relationship with God. Let the light of God shine into those dark places. Put on the armor of light. Because you know what time it is. The season of Advent is a time that we look forward to and hope for the coming of Christ. Now I know that scares a lot of people. It's scary to think about Christ coming back. Why is it scary? Because you're afraid because you aren't right with God. That's the only reason to be afraid. If you were right with God, you wouldn't worry about him coming again. But Jesus says, be prepared. Because he's coming in an hour you don't expect. He says, he gives a great example. He says, if the owner of the house knew when the thief was coming, he'd stay up all night looking for him so that he'd be ready when he came. And Jesus told us he's coming back. That's a fact. He's coming back. And the question is, are we prepared for that coming? And in most cases, probably in all cases, the answer is no. We're not ready. But if I told you with great certainty that Jesus was coming back tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, you know there are things in your life that you would change today because you knew he was coming tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. Now, I cannot tell you with great certainty that Jesus is coming tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. But he might. I don't know. And those things that you thought about that you need to change because you would change them because he's coming at 10 tomorrow, you need to change. Because those things will keep you from heaven. Those things will take you off of the road of this pilgrimage. And that's not what we want. This is a time when we not to be afraid of Jesus, but to look forward to it. We weren't afraid when he came as that little baby in the manger. Nobody's afraid of that. There are theologians who argue and say that next coming is not the second coming because they say that Jesus comes to us every day in the Eucharist. So that's the second coming. We're not afraid of this. But if I tell you Jesus is coming again tomorrow, all of a sudden we're struck with fear. Many people didn't recognize him when he came as that baby. Many people, even people who consider themselves devout Catholics, don't recognize him when he comes in this Eucharist. But I promise you, when he comes again, you will know who he is. There's no doubt about that. And while I can't tell you when he's coming, I can tell you that he is. And we need to be prepared for that. Because that's what this pilgrimage is about. We're on this journey to a sacred place. And so we journey in hope during this Advent season. We journey in hope and in action so that we can better ourselves and stay on course. And we don't have to be fearful because we aren't on this journey alone. We aren't just on this journey with one another. Jesus journeys with us. And that's important for us to remember. That's what this season of hope is all about. None of us, truth be told, may be here when Jesus comes again for his second or third coming, depending on how you want to look at it. All of us could be gone. There are many people for thousands of years who have died waiting for that coming. But even if you aren't here for that coming, you will stand before him in judgment. We're all going to die. We don't like to hear that. But everybody in here is going to die. Nobody gets out of here alive. We're all going to die. We're all going to stand before Jesus and have to answer him. And we don't have to fear that if we do what he says. He says, be prepared. Because I'm coming at an hour you don't expect. Does anybody here, I want you to raise your hand if you know when you're going to die. Nobody raised their hand. Nobody knows when they're going to die. But when you do, you have to be ready. You have to be prepared to face Jesus. You have to be prepared to reach the end of our pilgrimage. It's a long journey. We said that. A pilgrimage is a journey, usually a long one, to a sacred place. That place where Jesus is king. As an act of religious devotion. So during this Advent season, we begin anew our pilgrimage. We begin anew our journey to that sacred place for which we don't have to fear. That place that we look forward to with joyful hope. We pray that in Mass. We look forward in joyful hope to your coming again. We say that. We need to mean it. We don't have to fear. We have to persevere in hope and not despair. Today, we begin anew our pilgrimage. Let's not be afraid. As we prayed and sang in our song this morning, let us go rejoicing to the house of the Lord.